Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelancer writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the item supplement Grimbuckle's Guide to Smithing, designed by Dave Albin for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Now, I am a big fan of the Monster Hunter series, at least as of Monster Hunter World, like most folks. So a couple years. The concept of being able to craft your own gear based on the creatures that you are hunting, and then there's a cool like synergy between those kind of, if that thing emits lightning, attacks, then you'll have lightning resistance for armor, you'll deal lightning damage for your weapons or whatever, and they look like that creature, which is a really cool, and it's a very simple feedback loop. It works really well, and it's an absolutely awesome gaming system. And I also, the crafting system for RPGs varies a lot. Sometimes games do it where I do it just enough to get the good stuff out of it, and a lot of times I just ignore crafting completely because the loot drops are good enough. So D&D is weird when it comes to crafting because it doesn't really have a good crafting system in the official rules, but it's got plenty of loot drops already, and it's obviously just all up to the DM anyway in terms of, are you getting a lot of magic items or are you not? In other words, would there be a big draw for crafting? What this supplement does is essentially take a lot of weapons and items and armor from the Dungeon Master's Guide, so official stuff that we already have, and give them recipes and some rules for crafting, although it's very light on the rules. And ultimately, I'm pretty disappointed about what it actually provides, because a lot of it is just kind of regurgitating, again, stuff that we've already got in the Dungeon Master's Guide, a lot of the recognizable weapons and items and armor, and just adds here's how many weeks it takes to make. Which, are people really going through like weeks and weeks of downtime, or is this like between adventures stuff? In my campaign, it's very much like a day-to-day thing. Like, you've got something going on, you've got another adventure, or you're just continuing to go on. Like, there is no real lengthy downtime. So I always find it weird that D&D is kind of balanced that way, to have weeks of being able to craft stuff or have downtime. And of course, cost. I've talked about that in various other reviews when it comes to shopping and items and stuff, and it's really gonna, again, come down to how the DM is gonna run their game, right? Is it, how flush with cash is your universe? Are your adventurers being rewarded so much that they would barely ever, they could retire in a couple levels, and have just all like hundreds and hundreds of gold that the average person definitely does not have? Or is it pretty rare, where they're skimping by to get, barely any amount of gold together, and you've created more of a low, a harsher economy and maybe a low magic world? So it's hard to comment on that from a balance perspective, other than I still think that the higher stuff is still really crazy. Even if you use like the average stuff from Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide, it still feels pretty nuts to spend like 2,000 gold and 10 weeks to craft a rare item. But if you think about it, like, a lot of D&D players are, murder hobo is kind of the term we use, but an archaic term now. But if you're not really, you're not spending your money on stuff in the world in part of role playing and like buying houses and buying goods and services and stuff, then sure, you could just, if you're playing it like an action RPG, which a lot of people are, nothing wrong with that, then gold is just potential magic items, right? That's the one thing you want to spend your loot on, is funneling it back into my character growth. So turning gold, rewarded, whether it's gems or actual gold piles or whatever else, into magic items is good. So I like that concept. I know this is a big rant to start, but I like the idea of crafting in terms of being able to make your own magic items. I think that's a very solid system. And again, I love the Monster Hunter series for doing that as well. And there's a lot of fun potential there. And I feel like this supplement doesn't do that, unfortunately. It's got a lot of problems that mainly just doesn't provide enough content, even though you think it does when you're first flipping through here and you see, okay, it's got over 50 recipes, but the recipe part is only like a sentence. It's mostly just, again, copy and pasting what's already available in the Dungeon Master's Guide, so the usefulness is not very useful for, I imagine most people already have this content. So the main thing you're getting is how many weeks and the cost for an item, and it's very easy to tell that, because it's just based on the item rarity. So a common item takes 1 work week and 50 gold. A rare item takes 10 weeks and 2,000 gold pieces. It does have that for any consumables or potions. And then the other thing is there's 1 special ingredient you need to make each item. So, and this is mostly a monster part or a special thing that can be found nearby a monster or in a monster lair. Basically, all of them is some kind of Monster Hunter type quest. So it might be, rock feathers or vampire fangs, dragon teeth or giant toenails, like just various things that you would probably have to slay that monster to get it. Not always. And some of the more interesting things, recipes, are the ones that maybe give you some different ideas on how to frame that as a story quest, because I do like the idea that, hey, if you want to craft a magic item, yeah, it's going to cost you some, resources in the form of money, but it's also going to be a quest involved, and I think that's really cool. I did something similar with our Tomb of Annihilation campaign. One of my players, I had him basically be a monster hunter, and he could, through basically had a shopping list of here's the creatures you need to slay. And then after slaying, a couple different creatures, he would be able to craft, like a flail snail shell or whatever, and craft those different things into a magic item. So it was just a straight up quest reward. I didn't fuck around with the work week and all that stuff. I would have also liked to see some kind of system for rolling skill checks for crafting, or a skill threshold or something. There's weirdly nothing like that here. It's all just, if you have the money, you have the time, and you have that whatever special ingredient is, then you do it. Like, you just do it after that amount of time. So to use another example for my campaigns, in our current one, Rime of the Frost Maiden, it's actually the same player, he likes the crafting thing. I put together a system where he could craft using a certain volatile substance found in Rime of the Frost Maiden, and craft certain magic items, which kind of have a little bit of a cursed drawback to them, by using this certain raw material that he has to find in the wild, as well as gold, but they're not nearly as much as this, and time, but it's not nearly as long as this. It's basically built out of long rests instead of like weeks. So that way you can actually have time to craft your stuff during the course of a single campaign. Now, that's just some examples of how, but meanwhile, he doesn't just craft them. He uses, there is skill checks involved. So he has to, he's an artificer in that campaign. So he has to make a, whatever the artificer tools check is. And if he succeeds, then he makes the item after a certain amount of checks. If he fails, there's no consequence. You just didn't be able to take advantage of that downtime, which is a short rest or a long rest, to be able to craft that item. So it's just kind of wasted time. So that's the way I did the crafting thing. I would have loved to see something similar used for just, overall crafting and magic items and being able to use monster parts and all that. And that's not at all what we got here. Instead, it's just a bunch of essentially items from the Dungeon Master's Guide with a little bit of, I guess the best you could say is story hook ideas. But even then, it's just a single part of a sentence, like the scales of an adult dragon for dragon scale mail, which makes sense. A jasmal stone often protected by an iron golem. Adamantine, believed to be near a cyclops lair. And a lot of these are just like a certain gem or a leaf or something that is in the vicinity of this creature. Whereas others are like the act like storm giant blood. And the ones that I found were more interesting are the ones that require you to do something extra that's not just slay the creature. So you have to do a little bit. So like one of the best examples was the Mace of Terror. Requires a mace that has been regurgitated by a remoraz. That's a cool idea, right? So you have to already have a certain kind of weapon that you want to enchant, and it has to have been ingested and then thrown up by a pretty powerful creature. So that's a neat little, like, okay, we can't just kill it. We have to do all these things together to make it happen, which I think is a neat idea. The oath bow has to be a bow blessed by a planetar. Like, that's part of like a role-playing quest thing at that point. Is the Plantar actually giving you a quest, or do you have to? Is the quest to try to get this creature to bless your bow? Like that's more than just having to slay that particular creature. So I would have liked to see a lot more of those that had to do with giving cool story quests that don't necessarily involve just going out and slaying that creature, or just give me more information or more ingredients or something to make it a little bit more than just, hey, go kill this thing, hey, go kill that thing, you know. Maybe I'm looking for, here's some you know, here's 4 or 5 ingredients, and these are, and here full on like you know, encounter builds that we can do. So there's a certain, you know, creature that you have to go fight to do this, and it's located in this kind of layer, and there's these kind of hazards, you know, make it a little bit more involved rather than just a single creature in some random part of your world. So it didn't really work for me, and the fact that you can even craft legendary items is kind of hilarious because the cost and time and items are just absolutely ridiculous. Like the Hammer of Thunderbolts, legendary hammer, very cool. It's very much the you know, very, very extremely powerful weapon. Requires 50 work weeks, 100,000 gold pieces, and the horn of a Tarask. Now, I know, tier 4 legendary items, it's just bonkers, right? It doesn't matter. But like at some point, it's like, so killing the Tarask or getting its horn isn't even your end game. It's like, this is your quest to get this item, and then you craft this item, and then what? You already took down a Tarask, right? Like, you know, what else are you gonna go do? Like, go just smite some gods or something at that point. And a lot of them were just kind of hilarious like that. That's not necessarily the fault of this supplement, but I just found it hilarious that these legendary items require like just ridiculous amounts of feats, and basically defeating all these like end game, like the phylactery of a lich, or the what was the funny one? Oh, the head of a Balor for the Vorpal sword, I believe. Just, and 50 weeks is a year, by the way. It would take you, as you after you defeat this incredibly high end thing, your character's gone for a year and spends 100,000, which they probably do have that much money at that point. If you've actually been adventuring, you maybe you do have 100,000 gold, and you come back with a Vorpal sword, and you're like, now what? So I thought that was just kind of goofy. That's really only for legendary items, though. The rest feel a little bit more reasonable. I just wish that it was a little bit more interesting and had a little bit more going for it, because as of right now, there's just, I don't really see a reason that you need to even have this supplement. If you're really interested in the crafting thing, I don't think it does good enough for crafting. Sorry, my dogs are fixing to have a war behind me. And it just didn't seem like it was worth utilizing, frankly, which is disappointing, because I really like that system. I think that it can be a very fun system, and I crave a good crafting system for D&D 5th edition, and unfortunately this doesn't appear to be it. Let's go over my pros and cons for Grimbuckle's Guide to Smithing. By the way, before we go, I know everybody's art budget is different, and stock art is there to use, but please, for the love of goodness, you need to have a better cover page, if I can give that kind of critical advice. I have seen this particular art several times over. Now, granted, I'm somebody who obviously reviews a lot of content, so I see a lot of stock art, so it affects me differently than most. You know, a lot of people probably haven't ever seen this art before. But again, pony up and try to get a good cover picture, because that does, you know, we're not supposed to judge our books by our covers, but we absolutely do, and I am judging that one because that is art that I've seen several times over. All right, pros and cons. Pro, over 50 crafting recipes for items, weapons, and armor found in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So I did have to add a bit of snark on there, the fact that these are not new. As far as I'm aware, none of these are new. They're all just weapons, armor, and stuff from the Dungeon Master's Guide, but at least they inserted a lot of them in here, and you know, made the effort to give them all some kind of item involved with that many items. Pro, crafting complications and a few recipes suggest interesting quest hooks. So something I glossed over is this crafting complications table in the beginning, which is just every 10 weeks or 5 weeks, there's a 10% chance that a complication occurs, and these are not like, you know, a mishap, or you take damage, or the item has a detriment or a curse or something. It's like, these are all story hooks. Like a rival wizard has shown keen interest in your work, or your tools are stolen, or rumor has it that what you're working on is extremely dangerous. This is very tricky for a DM to handle, because this opens up entirely new story hooks, so it's almost too much for a table, and yet this is some of the more interesting content in this supplement, along with how I mentioned some of those, like the Mace regurgitated by the rumor has, that could lead to some more interesting, unique situations, that makes it far more interesting than just, okay, you spent 10 weeks making this item and then it's done. So that part is pretty cool, and it's a neat idea, but ultimately might even be a little bit more work for, it's unfortunate that my pros even have some like caveats with them, but might actually be more work for a DM versus that table. Also, if it might involve a rival, give me another table of rivals. Give me a D6 tables of rivals that would be involved with the party, just to throw out there. Cons, there's no skill checks or actual crafting system beyond time and money. I think there should be something there. As I mentioned, I gave an example earlier about the system that I put together. Yes, I think framing it around a quest is fine, but making your characters, again, it can be something they're proficient at, but they should have some kind of, they're smithing, they're making these weapons, whether it's tinkering or whatever tools you want to use, there should be some proficiency there. And I think you could reward players for having, those good skill checks and dice rolls. Maybe they can get it done faster and get a discount on their cost or whatever else. Con, the items are just basically 90% just copy and pasted from the Dungeon Master's Guide, which again most people have and is not really that useful. It's 90% that and like 10% recipe. It's the little last sentence here, which involves again the work week, the gold pieces, and the one random item, which some of them, well, hopefully a lot of them do make sense. For Frostbrand, you need a tail of an ice devil. That kind of stuff is nice. For a trident of fish command, it's a rogue stone found near a water elemental. You'd probably use like a actual fish creature, but whatever. So they do make, it's not completely random. They make sense for the most part, but that's really all the information that we get. And the other con, who is Grimbuckle? This is something that I haven't seen in a while, but a lot of publishers and creators love to, because Wizards does it, is they like to have it's so-and-so's book of whatever, it's so-and-so's tome of whatever. The problem is that so-and-so, you can't just slap their name on it and then add a personality. They need to be a personality in here. You need to create a foreword. I mean, I think there's a little one that's like a little paragraph here at the beginning. That this is not much of a foreword, by the way. From Vornak Grimbuckle, and it's just a picture of a person. Like there's no sidebars, there's no fun information in there. Inject some personality in here, because I do like that. If this is Grimbuckle's, who is Grimbuckle? Like, let me know. Does he prefer some things over others? Has he tussled with some of these monsters before? Give me that, and I think that adds. Honestly, it goes a long way towards really helping personalize a supplement. Final verdict. Crafting magic weapons from monster parts or layers is a compelling idea, but Grimbuckle's Guide to Smithing fails to provide an adequately compelling monster hunting and crafting system beyond the barest recipes. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Christopher, Thomas, Adam, Stan, Alex, Cam, William, I'm Loud, and Lachlan Baird. And gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, Scullion, Nick, Blood Angel, Vronis, Baboon, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, James, and Kyle. Thank you all very much for your support.